His name wasn't Norman. He didn't run a motel. But on an isolated farmstead in the heartland of America during the bland, balmy days of the Eisenhower era, there lived a quiet and recluse bachelor with a lopsided grin and a diffident manner. During the day, his neighbors knew him as a slightly strange but accommodating man, the kind who could always be counted on to help with the threshing and lend a hand with a chore. It never occurred to any of them that his life was dominated by an overpowering presence of his dead mother, or that his nights were spent performing the darkest and most appalling rituals. A robber of graves, a butcher of women's bodies, a transvestite who dressed himself not in the clothes but in the very skin of his victims. He pursued his unspeakable deeds for years without detection. When his atrocities were finally brought to light, they set off a spasm of natural revulsion whose after effects are still felt today. They also inspired a writer named Robert Bloch to use them as the basis of a novel called Psycho, which 1 year later Alfred Hitchcock turned into the most frightening movie ever made. But compared to what really happened in Wisconsin, Psycho is as reassuring as a fairy tale. Welcome to Paranormal Playground, a production of Dead Squirrel in the Woods. We are your hosts, the Phantom Pals, Nick and Leah. We are back for another episode of Cocktails and Creeps. We've even got special mugs. I don't know that you can see, but they're skulls. My thought on this was, we're going to get into that later, but the skulls will come up with the story of Ed Gein. So we are going to be talking about part 2 of Ed Gein. Now, remind me, we left off at Henry's death, right?
Yep, so we talked about Henry's death and how that was the first controversy of Gein's life.
Okay. Well, I hope you have your drinks,
Yes.
and we're going to take one quick.
Yikes.
Yikes, okay. All right.
So to have fun, Nick and I went out to an Edgar Allan Poe event yesterday.
Yes.
And with every story they told, they also gave a drink. So we're going to be a little careful with our old fashions today.
Yes. Actually, an interesting fact about that, we did see the Edgar Allan Poe thing, and I'm doing research on that for a future episode with him, but we brought up in the intro, we brought Alfred Hitchcock up.
Yes.
And Poe did have a, what's the word? A influence on Alfred Hitchcock. So it's kind of a nice little preview of what's to come in the future episodes.
Yeah.
But back to Ed Gein.
My buddy. All right.
Yes, we left off with his brother's death.
Yes. So as a quick recap, his brother had passed away in what was said to be a fire. But upon finding the body, it was determined that Henry had a couple blows to the back of the head and likely, maybe, possibly died that way versus being burned because he didn't have any smoke found in his lungs. However, the death certificate was signed as asphyxiation.
Which, okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna go with that.
We're just gonna let that hang out there.
So we did talk about if we believed if he did or not. So
now
we're gonna move on.
We've got another traumatic event that happened that kind of shaped Ed Gein, right?
Yep. So
This
this
was
was about a year after Henry died.
something about purchasing straw?
Oh, that even comes later.
Oh, okay.
So a year after Henry dies, unfortunately, uh, Miss Augusta had fallen into a stroke and was confined to her bed. Now, in this year, it was just Augusta and Ed in the home. So it was just those two for the entire year. I hate to say it like this, it sounds funky, but Ed had Augusta to himself and vice versa.
Okay.
So in that year, they took care of each other. And then when she had her stroke and was bedbound, Ed was taking care of her. However, she started to act more erratically, even though she already was, but this
Okay.
was even more so.
What do you mean by erratic?
So she would have a continued cycle of psychological and emotional type of abuse towards Ed. She would degrade him, compare him to dad, and say that he was as useless as his father. However, then she would show like this other side of her and be a little bit more maternal to
Hmm.
him, and then offered him to sleep with her in the bed at night.
Hmm. I
Now,
mean,
I can see moms doing that to like children, but by now, like Ed was
I
in his
mean, I
40s.
know some children that it does take a while to get them in their own bed and sleep through the night. But in your
He's
40,
he's 40
but he's 40.
or
Oh,
44, I think, at the time.
oh, yeah, that's kind
That's
of weird.
you.
No, that is
That's your
not.
age.
Oh, yes, that is my age.
So could you sleep in the same bed as your mom and like be comforting to her?
Not, no, that would be kind of odd.
I love how you had to think about that.
I was trying to think of maybe context that would be that there would be a situation, but I don't think of any.
Right,
It's
right. I'm definitely I'm 42, 3. Okay, 43. I'm not lying. Think about that for a second. On the opposite end, I don't see myself as a caretaker of my dad being able to like just crawl up
okay.
next to him in bed. So I would say that that was a weird situation.
Right. It's not like your teenage daughter still being affectionate to you or
Right, right.
teenage son giving you hugs and stuff, but at 44, like
Right.
in the same bed?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he actually served as her only caretaker and constantly served her needs hands and foot after this. Um, Gein later recounted visiting a man named Smith to purchase straw, and mom wanted to come with, even though she was a little bit more bedbound. She
Hmm.
wanted to join with. Upon arriving at the home, they both saw Smith angrily beating a dog. Ended up beating the dog to death in front of Gein's eyes. And it was
Hmm.
found out that Smith was actually in a big fight with his living girlfriend at the time.
Ooh, that would not go over well with Augusta.
Correct. And as they were fighting, he was beating her dog and killed her dog, which obviously upset Gein. And let's back up a little bit because I don't know if we talked about this in the past, but when he was at the store, when his parents owned the store in La Crosse, he was about 3 or 4.
Okay.
He was always told not to come back into the shed. And well, because 3 and 4 year olds listen so well, he went back to the shed and
Hmm.
witnessed his parents butchering a pig. Butchering a pig or deer, cow, whatever. I mean, we understand that that's how
Okay.
we get our food. Hello, kitty. We have a visitor today.
Ruby wanted to join us.
That's okay. Hi, Ruby.
So.
She's so cute. So, as he witnessed this butchering of a pig, it hit him hard. He was a lover of animals, which again goes to my idea of was he a serial killer? Because some of the major things with serial killers, like the top 9 points, is showing behaviors towards animals that are violent and mean, where he was the opposite end. He didn't want to see the violence to animals. So seeing the pig being butchered, and now fast forward into his 40s and he's watching this dog being killed, it really affected him. But it didn't affect Augusta in the way you think it would. Instead, she was furious that there was a living girlfriend.
Okay, so the live-in girlfriend was more important than somebody killing an animal.
Right.
Especially now,
It was
it's
Smith's harlot, is what she
it's
was calling her.
it's really tough because like cats and dogs are part of your family. If
Right.
you like cows, pigs, stuff like that, that is stuff you raise for food.
Right.
That makes sense. But
Right.
so this guy commits animal abuse
Mm-hmm.
because of a fight with his
Girlfriend.
girlfriend, live-in girlfriend at
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
And Augusta's fine with the killing of the dog.
Yeah, wasn't upset about that at all. Was just more upset that there was a harlot in the home.
Because I'd be more upset about the dog. Like, you do that now and you're not staying out and you're in jail and you're being charged
Right.
with
Animal
something.
cruelty and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
totally.
okay.
So she was so extremely upset and yelling and really got herself worked up, where not too much longer, she then suffered a second stroke.
Hmm.
Augusta passed away in December of 1945 after that stroke.
Okay.
So we're going to have to go backwards a little bit here because I'm sitting here thinking Ed was probably in his 40s at this time. To strike that, he was actually 39 years old when his mom died. So he was in his 30s when he was taking care of her, 38.
Okay.
But still, I still wouldn't be like cozying up with my dad in his bed when I was 38 years old.
No.
I mean, I don't know if that changes for you a little bit.
No.
38? No? Okay, just
No.
checking.
So now we're talking Augusta's death here. We read um what's his name? George Gein's obituary.
Yes.
Now we remember how in depth that obituary was.
Right.
Here is Miss Augusta Gein. It reads as follows: Miss Augusta Gein died at the Wild Rose Hospital on December 29th of a cerebral brain hemorrhage. The body was brought to the Galt Funeral Home, where services were held on December 31st. Reverend C. H. Weiss officiating. She is survived by one son, Edward, who lives on the home farm southwest of here. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. George had a lot of nicer things to say in there. Hers was more just facts.
Yeah, and it also begs the question, who's writing the obituaries? Like these days you can write your own obituary before you pass. Your
Mm-hmm.
family can write it for you, or the funeral home will write it. Um,
So that
so
kind
who
of,
wrote it? And then why the different feelings between the two?
I don't think Ed wrote it. I don't think he would have been able to.
I don't think he had the
The
intelligence to
right.
write such things.
So that goes to speak how different she was seen in the community.
Right. If she was even seen that much at all, she was
Yeah.
really just as much as a recluse as Ed turned out to be,
Okay.
because the world was naughty, I
Yeah.
guess.
They were all
I don't
heathens.
know. Yeah, I didn't know another word for it. They were
They're all,
naughty. They
they're
were
all heathens.
worldly sinners. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was written by author Harold Fletcher, who is,
Which I read out of
yeah.
that book,
So
Deviant. I read
Deviant,
the obituary out of that.
right? So he's the author of Deviant. And he actually penned that Ed was heard and was quoted stating he lost the only friend and one true love. And he was absolutely alone in the world. I want to go back on that a little bit here. Your one true love. When I think of a one true love, I'm thinking like spouse, a significant other, somebody of like a romantic interest.
Mm-hmm.
Do you love your parents? Sure. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
everybody's situation, but I'll say yes, I love my parents.
Yeah.
Are they like my true loves? So I would have questioned that if I would have heard a grown man say that about his parents.
Mm-hmm.
maybe start talking about some counseling.
Yeah. Um, was that, and I mean, as we further go into this, when he goes to court, he does, that does get addressed,
Right.
obviously, but um, yeah, that is kind of creepy.
Yeah,
Um,
a little bit.
how the how people in that town didn't find it creepy.
Unless they couldn't
Yeah.
say anything. I don't
Right,
know.
or did they just feel bad for him?
Right.
Um,
But also, we're going to look at it from a different point of view. Okay. Ed had grown up with just his mom, his dad, and his brother.
hmm.
His mom took hold of his life pretty much
Yes, she did.
and just over dominated everything in his life.
I mean, she tried to do that with both of them.
Right. Then he lost his dad. Then he lost his brother. And then lost the one that controlled his entire life completely. So he did lose everything he knew.
Yeah, well, he did. Yes, that would
Mm-hmm.
be so. I mean, when you lose a family member like that, that means something to you. You do start, yeah. I could see where that statement would come at that time, but
Right.
it's still kind of.
So after her death, um, Ed ended up completely neglecting his entire home, except for his mother's room, which was kept in the perfect condition that she left it in. No one in the community saw Ed unless he was running errands or stopped for a beer at the tavern.
From what I read in Deviant, it
Mm-hmm.
says that there were certain rooms that were kept untouched, and Ed did not go in that house.
Correct.
He stayed to about 3 rooms in that whole house,
Mm-hmm.
is what I
Yep.
found out. So he preserved a lot of her areas.
Closed off the doors and did not go in there, and it stayed just as she left it.
Mm-hmm.
Do we find that odd? I have different theories.
I it can be. I think it depends on the situation. With what she meant to him, people lose, parents lose kids before they go, and they keep the rooms exactly how it is, and it's tough to let go.
Right.
Um, Ed had a problem letting go. Now, so that is kind of a
So my
thin
theory with
line.
that is it was it more of like a memorial to her, and was it
Right.
really that bad that he did that?
Or did he just not want to use those areas because he didn't,
Right.
like, they weren't necessary to him? He didn't, that wasn't his area anyway. He never really did stuff there.
Right. I think everybody grieves differently.
Yeah.
There's a huge process to grieving, and everybody's going to do it on their own terms in their own way. I have not lost my parents, and I have a brother that I have not lost. So I haven't been through his
Mm-hmm.
situation. I also wasn't raised the same way, have the
No.
same mindset. So I can't say how he grieved was necessarily the worst. Um, he kept his mom's space the way she liked it.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up neglecting the rest of the house. Maybe he didn't feel the pressure of having to keep it clean all the time. But when you see some of the photos of the home later, um, it
Yeah.
turned from neglecting to like just completely ignoring his space to it was almost like a should be a condemned situation to live
Yeah.
in. It was
Which
disgusting.
which we do have those pictures, and I will get them onto something on the page so that you can accompany it with it.
Yeah.
So you can see the crime scenes, the how the house was, pictures of Ed, pictures of Augusta,
Mm-hmm.
just all of it for the whole series. And we'll set up like a video reel of
Right.
stuff so that after you see this, you can go back and you can watch those.
Correct. So now we're going to really get into some of the stuff that happened
And
after his mom died.
at first, before you go there,
Yeah,
we talked about how Ed lived in the
correct.
house. Um, so, what about in the community?
So the community, again, only saw him once in a while when he would
Okay.
come out for drinks. running errands. They knew who he was. He was kind of like this odd guy,
Okay.
missing his mom. What are you reading?
Well, that's what I've got, and but um, many started to think, um, just you
He did
know,
like the odd jobs around the town
yeah.
still. So, like people still saw him.
Okay, so he
And then he
wasn't.
even rented out sections of his land,
Okay,
but then people wouldn't pay him for those sections of the land that he was renting out.
that has to be annoying.
Yeah,
What about some of those odd jobs? Did he always get paid for those odd jobs?
I'm assuming so.
Because when I was reading Deviant,
Oh,
they were questioning him in the psyche valves, and he said that people took advantage of him.
and I can see that happening. He was the non-confrontational, um, odd-mannered, laughed at like random weird things, not out much.
Okay,
Really didn't know how to socialize.
right.
So in my theory, he likely probably didn't know how to handle conflict.
So if they didn't pay him for his day's work, he probably didn't know how to go up to him and say, "Hey,
Right,
where's my pay?"
right.
Okay.
So 1947, we're moving forward a little bit here. February of 1947 marked 18 months since mom had passed. Now, Ed, again, lonely, went over a year of not having any family. Didn't sound like he had too many friends, was taken advantage of, whether it's his job or the places he rented
Mm-hmm.
or the parts of property he rented out.
Yep.
Um, he was said to have strange visions and began to think that he could raise the dead by his own will. I don't know who all knows about schizophrenia. However, schizophrenia textbook happens typically in midlife in a man's life when something major has happened and really changes his brain chemistry.
Hmm.
There is early onset schizophrenia and stuff like that, but this is almost textbook to how schizophrenia starts. Something major, traumatic happened in his brain. He lost his mom. He's his intense loneliness. Now he's got this strange visions and thinks he can raise the dead. So he went
Okay.
to Spirit Land Cemetery, which
We
we've
got to
seen. Yeah,
visit.
that was really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And he dug up his first victim, which was Grace Beggs.
Okay.
He then scouted obituaries for potential bodies that reminded him of his mother.
Hmm.
So Ed said that he actually tried to dig up his mother at one point, but the soil was too sandy.
Okay.
So right now we're looking at Ed being 41 years old.
Okay.
Okay. So midlife, tragic incident happened in his life, changed his brain chemistry, intense loneliness,
So he starts thinking
anger with
he can
the
reincarnate people,
seeing things. Now he thinks
seeing
he can,
things.
right. So now the schizophrenia has really taken hold of him.
So who did he see though? Like, did he say, was it his mother? Was it?
I have seen or read, not only in this book, but other news articles or articles upon researching that he did
Mm-hmm.
see his mom.
Okay.
So he wanted to bring his mom back.
Okay.
And in some ways, he felt like maybe he could make his mom come back by taking body parts, skin, things of that nature from other women that looked like his mom so he can kind of recreate mom.
Okay. So he was trying. All right, I get it now.
So we kind of got like a Frankenstein thing going on.
Hmm. All
Okay.
right.
So also in 1947, so we went from February, where he dug up his first victim, Grace
Mm-hmm.
Beggs, on to May 1st. There was a little girl named Georgia Jean Weckler who disappeared without a trace, leaving no suspects. And the only clue was a tire track from a Ford. She was taken at the end of her driveway after school in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin.
Okay. So what do you think of that? Because I was reading in Deviant about that when they were trying to rule him out of that, and the lie
Right,
detector test ruled him out of that.
right,
He said he never left Plainfield, other than when he
right.
went to Milwaukee to
Enlist.
enlist
Yeah,
in the army.
right. Um, I'm gonna go with no. I don't think that he had anything to do with that because one, Fort Atkinson is quite the distance from Plainfield,
Mm-hmm.
and then two, she was 8.
And he was a recluse pretty much. So
Right.
he wasn't trying to leave Plainfield.
And up until his first actual murder, he did a lot of his stuff at night.
Okay.
So digging up the bodies and stuff like that. I don't see him driving all the way to Fort Atkinson, randomly seeing this little girl and grabbing her. And the reason I say that is because if we look at his actual dug up bodies and then his 2 victims, murder victims,
Mm-hmm.
none of them were children.
Okay.
He seemed to have a pattern.
They were all older women.
Older women who reminded him of mom.
Okay. That makes sense. I was when you brought up that case, I remember hearing of it and was kind of curious.
So my theory is no, that he didn't have anything to do with that one. So we're going to go to 1950, which was about 3 years after he dug up his first, and he now went to dig up his second body, which was Elise Sparks.
Okay.
And that was like the end of March, beginning of April.
Okay.
Now Ed's 43.
Okay.
Okay.
I did read how he figured out if he could get in the grave, though. So, you know how some graves have the stone top and are tough to get off, and a lot of the graves there, and with the sandy soil there, a lot of them were the stone top. He would take because the grave was still fresh, he would take a rod down, and he could tell by the sound that it made if it was a wood casket or stone.
Interesting. Okay. So now we're going to see kind of an uptick because we had a 3-year difference. And now in 1951, he digs up his third body, Marie Bergstrom. Then he does a fourth body, Mabel Everson. Mm-hmm. And then his fifth body, Eleanor Adams, which was from the Plainfield Cemetery, which Mabel was also from as well. And this was all done between February into August of 51. So now we've got a shorter time span, more dug up bodies. Mm-hmm. All right. His sixth body was a year later in November. So almost just over a year because it was August to November.
So he sped it up and then
he chilled for a second.
He chilled and
his sixth body was Ursula Jane Callan.
Okay.
And then another year later, there is a girl by the age of 15 who was abducted while babysitting for friends in La Crosse, and her body was never found.
Okay.
We keep bringing up these teenage girls and these younger girls, and I'm still sticking to my theory of that was not his goal.
No, and that was La Crosse. He was right. I mean, he was born in La Crosse.
Right.
But he stayed in Plainfield. His lie detector tests that they did and everything to rule him out in the beginning, they found inconclusive, and they actually did those tests twice and got the same results both times.
Yep. But it wasn't too long after she went missing that Ed dug up his seventh body, which was Lola Foster. And Ed is 48 at this point.
Okay.
All right. So up until 1953, I can't say that what he's doing is normal. Obviously not.
No.
And probably some major issues. Psychologically really messed up.
Mm-hmm.
But he actually has not murdered anybody.
Which these are still crimes, so if he were caught,
right.
I mean, there would be consequences to it, of course, but
right. So I'm not condoning what he did, but what I'm saying is he didn't hurt anybody.
Right.
He wasn't a threat to harm himself or others. Okay. He just had this weird devotion to mom. His schizophrenia has definitely took grasp of his personality.
Right.
And he needed to recreate mom. He needed the body parts. Funny enough, if he didn't need the body part, he would then bring that body part back to the grave.
Okay, yeah.
Kind of like waste not.
Okay, so he didn't need it, so he
He,
returned it back to them.
right.
Okay, was this kind of a guilt thing, maybe, or
He
was this
has been stated to say that he did feel guilty
okay?
a number of times for what he did, and the few times there's multiple times he actually went out to graves and would start the digging and just feel guilty. His conscience would hit him,
Mm-hmm.
and he would stop.
Okay.
So there was something in him that was still human, a human thought. So,
Okay.
but this is kind of where it ends because in 1954, he does actually perform his
Oh.
first victim or murder victim, which was Mary Hogan.
Okay.
So,
So,
bartender.
all right. So what do we know about Mary Hogan and why?
Well, got a whole thing about Mary Hogan here.
Okay. Do we need to mark that page, or do you have?
It's right here.
Okay.
All right. So she was actually born in Germany. Kind of cool. I think it's cool.
Yeah. That kind of goes with Augusta's upbringing.
True.
So.
And it's unknown when Mary actually came to the United States, but she
Mm-hmm.
married a Joseph Hogan in 1920 in Springfield, Illinois, and then divorced December of 1925. So
Okay.
about a
So.
5 year marriage.
Okay.
Mary had a daughter, Christine Medevselvo. If I said that right, and if I butchered it, I apologize. So in 1927, and her daughter was raised in foster care. Mary worked in the composing room of the Chicago Carton Company, and then she worked as a die cut press feeder at the Atlas Box Markers.
Okay.
So she lived in Chicago,
So she's well
mainly,
traveled.
yep, raised, lived in Chicago, Illinois. But then Mary moved to Babcock, Wisconsin in 1947 and bought the Foxhead Bar located in Babcock, Wisconsin.
Babcock.
Babcock,
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
That would be Babcock.
I want to make up my own words, if
Okay.
you can notice. So actually, Ed went to her bar pretty often.
Okay.
And on December 8th of 1954, so just before Christmas, he walked into the Foxhead Bar after closing and shot Mary with a .32 caliber pistol, taking her life.
Okay. I
He
can see.
loaded her into the pickup truck and took her back to his place. Later that morning, Seymour Lester discovered blood at the Foxhead Bar and then called police. However, police never found Mary Hogan
Mm-hmm.
until after they searched Ed Gein's farmhouse and found a skin face mask that he made from Mary Hogan's face.
Okay. No. When I was reading Deviant, they do talk about Mary Hogan, and Ed was questioned in this actually when she
Yes.
disappeared.
Yep. He was
Um,
questioned.
and he was cleared, which they're like, no, he couldn't have done it. But when he was doing his odd jobs, he would talk really like dark stories, like the magazines they used to have, where they had like your Alfred Hitchcock style stories,
Right.
and they would ask Ed, "Where's Mary Hogan?" And he would say, "She's at my house."
And then he
And
would
they
laugh.
and he had this awkward laugh. They said,
Right. Yeah.
so nobody believed him.
Yeah. They thought he was just making a very tasteless type of joke.
So
That was weird. Um, so not too long after, I would say 54 to 57,
yeah,
about 3 years later, November 16th, Bernice Warden, who is the age of 58, disappeared from her hardware store.
okay,
So now we're on the Warden. Deputy
okay.
Frank Warden returned from deer hunting to find his mother was gone.
Ooh.
Um, Arthur Sheely responded to Frank Warden's call, and upon entering the store, he noticed blood on the floor and a .22 caliber rifle that was taken out of place on its rack at the store. In the receipt book that they kept, they noticed that Ed Gein had bought antifreeze earlier in the day, meaning Ed was in the facility. He bought something. He
Okay.
might have been the last one to see her. So they went to Ed's farm and ended up finding Miss Warden's body hanging by the rafters,
Yeah.
gutted, like you would a deer.
Okay.
their whole purpose to go to Ed's house wasn't to assume he did something. There was suspicion, but it was more to ask questions. You might have been the last one to see her alive. Do you know what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And Ed wasn't home when they got there. So they went into the shed. Should they have? I mean, that's like a whole nother police question.
That is. But interesting fact on this, before Ed did that, he actually asked um, if he was going to be alone at the hardware store because that was the next day was the first day of deer hunting season.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some premeditation behind this.
Yeah. So we can kind of get into Bernice a little bit here. Just I wanted to make sure she has her coverage as well. She was born on May 9th in 1899, also in Illinois.
Hmm.
Okay. Bernice's father was part owner of the Warden Warden Hardware Store. If I said that wrong, I'm talking too fast. And he had done that with Bernice's future husband, Leon Warden. Bernice had 3 brothers, Lester, Burl, Lloyd, and one sister, Gladys.
Okay.
So Bernice and Leon took over the Warden Hardware Store located on Main Street in 1931. I'm not giving addresses because I'm just being a little cautious about population control and people running up to these spots.
And when we did the tour, we were warned they don't like in Plainfield. They do not embrace this.
Right.
So
they're not afraid to come out of their homes and shoo you away.
Yeah, and they're not nice about it. We got lucky and it was a quiet day and our tour was very uneventful.
Right. So I'm not giving the addresses, but it's something that we can definitely look at and talk about how our tour went.
Mm-hmm.
So they had one son, Frank Warden, who was born November 27th in 1922, who later lived in Plainfield, Wisconsin. Leon Warden, husband, passed away in 1931 at the age of 40, and that left Bernice to run the hardware store completely by herself. Bernice was a member of the American Legion Auxiliary of Plainfield and was a member of the Grand Chapter of Wisconsin Order of the Eastern Star out of Watoma, Wisconsin.
Oh.
Which is really awesome because when I did see her grave, I noticed that the Eastern Star symbol was there, and that happens to be something that I am a part of. So I felt kind of like the sisterhood thing going on there. In 1957, on the day that she passed, on November 16th, Ed came to the Warden Hardware Store for antifreeze, as stated. He took the antifreeze out to his car. He returned to the store and asked Bernice if he could see the .22 caliber rifle in the rack. Bernice handed the rifle to Ed, and then she turned and looked outside the window, viewing the shell station that was across the street. Ed pulled shut the caliber shell out of his pocket, so he already had a shell in his pocket, so premeditated here a little bit. Loaded into the rifle, pointed it at Bernice, and shot her in the back of the head, killing her. She fell, and he actually dragged her body to the rear of the store onto the loading dock, placed her body onto the back of the Warden Hardware delivery truck, and then drove it to East Road, where he parked it in pine trees. And then he walked himself back to the hardware store where his car was, and then drove his car to the truck in the woods.
That is a lot of dedication.
Right. And then loaded Bernice's body into his truck and drove home. So, and then of course, Frank came home from his hunting and noticed the blood, and things went on from there.
He also noticed a receipt on the counter.
Yeah, that was the antifreeze. Right.
So, and he also remembered being asked, is he going to be out hunting all day?
Right.
So,
and this all happened in the morning.
Yeah, and his suspicion was high from the get-go.
Right. She was 58 years old when she was killed. So those are the 2 murders that took place.
So,
and that really ended that reign of terror there, because it won't be much longer. Well, same day,
Mm-hmm.
that he's finally caught. So it really started from 47 to 57. So in 10 years' time, he
So
had undug bodies and then killed 2 people.
the actual anniversary of his arrest is, this is weird to say, but it's actually on my birthday.
Yeah.
I got to go to the jail on that day, and because I wanted to do something that I enjoy doing on that day. So I kind of put two and two together and decided to go to the Ed Gein jail.
Yeah. That's awesome. So besides the confirmed bodies that he dug up and the 2 murder victims, there were other possible bodies that they were trying to tie to Ed, 2 of which we talked about, which was Evelyn Hartley and Georgia Weckler, who were the
Okay.
15 and 8-year-old. There was another one, also Victor Travis, 42, from Plainfield, Wisconsin, a Ray Burgess from Plainfield,
Okay.
Wisconsin, and then the last
Those
one,
those were hunters that were in the area and they just
yeah,
disappeared.
right.
And so they think Ed might have had something to do with that, which kind of iffy on that because he chose older women. But if they were hunting on his land, he did not like people hunting on his land either.
Would he have
So,
killed them over it?
I mean, he wasn't stable. So, so, yeah, I don't know.
And then the last possible body that could have been connected to him was Eliza. I don't even know how to say her name, so I'm going to spell it so our followers can hear it correctly. It's
Alzad,
A,
Alzadia?
yeah, Alzaida.
Yeah, Alzdia,
There we go.
something like that.
And last name Abbott.
Yeah.
Um, she's 73 and from Spiritland, Wisconsin.
So, and that's in our confirmed dug up bodies, but so I
Yes.
don't know.
So it looks like she was confirmed as a dug up body, but then also kind of listed as an other possible body. So I'm sort of wondering if they were unsure for a while if he really performed that one.
Right, or he was the one that caused her demise, maybe.
Maybe.
But he would have taken the body with him.
Right, right.
So,
So that was a fun episode.
yes, it was. Do we, um, I guess we got part three coming now.
We're going to have a part 3 because we still got to go through all the court stuff.
Because part one is 45 minutes, and I don't want to keep you guys 45 minutes at one time.
I do. Talk to me forever.
Yeah, but.
And then we should do a part 3 because we still have to discuss the court timeline.
Yes, the psychiatry.
Yeah, we have a lot to go over yet.
A lot. So I don't know if this is going to be a 4-parter at this point, but
I could talk forever on him, so you're going to have to cut me off at some point.
Yes, I know side topics and questions that
Yeah,
probably distract us too. So, well, we are going to get into part 3 next week. And so that's another chance for you to have some cocktails with us.
Fantastic.
So, this has been a Dead Squirrel in the Woods Productions. This is Paranormal Playground with Nick and Leah. We are on YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe us for future installments. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. And